All right, welcome back with a quick little preview for another team heading to this year's International, and that is going to be our Eastern Europe CIS Regional Qualifier Champions, BB team, aka Bet Boom, aka the team with the absolute worst branding and logo in the entire International and DPC. By far, it's not even close. Like, seriously, I think my version of their logo might actually be a bit of an improvement because I didn't have a yellow marker that wouldn't stain my whiteboard, so I had to use orange, and it actually looks a little bit better. But I mean, geez, you'd think that they would rebrand at least a little bit heading into the International. But regardless, despite the fact that they have terrible branding, a terrible logo, terrible team name, this is a pretty good team, and I'm really excited to be doing this preview. And this is a team that has gone through some pretty significant changes, not only within their roster, but within organizations as well throughout this past DPC season. Before we get into it, again, just a quick reminder in case you've missed it, I've already done previews on Hikori, Talon, Sonics, and Entity, so in case you missed those, or if you're a fan of any of those teams, feel free to check those out, link in the description, or just on my channel. And after this video, I'm going to be putting up my RNG video just a few hours later, so look out for that. And then after that point, we're going to be getting into the top 12 teams of the DPC, which is super exciting. So, Bet Boom, BB team, where did they finish in the DPC amongst the rest? Well, they finished with 629 DPC points, which is pretty damn good, although not quite enough to get in the top 12. They finished 3rd place regionally and 16th place internationally. And taking a look at the roster, again, this is one that has gone through some changes, although not all that major, and it was more just the org swap that took place that ended up being the biggest thing that this team faced throughout this past year. Playing position 1, we have Dahak. Playing mid, we have Laurel. Off lane, we have Noticed. Position 4, we have familiar face Roger. Position 5, we have Saneko. And as coach, we have Mag. Previous members of the team being Force Major, who was the most recent player to have left this roster, and Dodgerin, who was not there since the end of tour number 1, despite the fact that this team had some pretty good results. For Dahak, he had actually never been to a TI, so this will be his first one, which is super exciting. The furthest he's ever been, closest he's ever been to TI, was finishing 5th place in the TI9 qualifiers with Gambit. Laurel and Notice have in fact not even ever played in any TI qualifiers, and yet this is going to be their first time attending, so that's even more exciting for them. Roger, of course, he's been around the scene for a very long time. This is going to be his 4th international. His furthest run was finishing 5th and 6th place at TI8 with Virtus Pro. And Saneko finishing 13th to 16th place at TI5, 6, and 9. Was his furthest run. Those were all with Navi, and those were the only 3 times that he's ever been to the International. So all 3 times he has made it through the group stage and then lost in the best of ones. Actually, I think only once he made it through the group stage, because I think TI 5 and 6 didn't have any eliminations in the group stage, if I remember correctly. And Mag, their coach, the furthest he's ever made it was 13th to 16th place at TI 9 with Navi as well, and he was their coach for that. Taking a look at their results, they actually start their DPC season off in the lower division of Eastern Europe, where they finish 2nd place with a tiebreaker matchup. They go 5-2, and they get promoted up to Div 1. So they miss out on the regional qualifiers, but they get themselves to that upper division, which means there's a shot at making it to the actual majors, since, of course, the first tour, unfortunately, did not have one. And they do just that. They finished 1st place in the 2nd tour, and although it wasn't a traditional tour, it did have to be modified due to the ongoing situations in Eastern Europe and Ukraine. They took advantage of that situation where they were placed into a playoff bracket and they won all 3 of their series to make it directly into the Stockholm Major, and they were the first team to qualify. They go 3-0. They earn themselves 400 DPC points, which is absolutely huge. You go from a team who is in the lower division, they're tied with 4 other teams to get into the upper division, but they make the cut. They then go through an org swap from Windstrike over to Bet Boom, losing one of their players, that being Dodgerin, and they come through and they win 1st place in the tour. They then go to Stockholm and also have a pretty impressive run where they finish 7th to 8th place. They go 2, 3, and 1 in the group stage and 1 and 2 on the main stage, earning themselves another 240 DPC points. Heading into tour number 3, it was going to be pretty exciting to see where this team would go from here. Was the 2nd tour just a fluke? Well, I wouldn't necessarily say it was a fluke. I wouldn't say that this is a bad team that just had one good tour. They still did pretty well in tour number 3, but they just didn't quite make the cut for the Arlington Major. They finished 4th place in the division, 4-3 record, 100 DPC points, and again, they missed that cutoff point. So That's all the points that we have to go off of. And so that earned them a total of 740 DPC points this past year, minus 111 for the roster changes of Force Major. Dodgerin did not actually reduce any points on this team because by the time he left, they hadn't even had any points yet. So can't get any deductions on points that you don't have. So let's take a look now at their results against other teams attending TI11, of which they've played 43 games where they go 23-20. In Tour 2, they start off their bracket facing off against Team Spirit, winning 2-1. That was their first series in Tour 1, playing against the TI defending champions. And they take them out in 3 games. They then beat Na'Vi 2-1 as well. At the Stockholm Major, they draw 1-1 up against Boom, Beast Coast, and Tundra. They beat Evil Geniuses and T1. They then lose to OG and Thunder Awaken. They beat Liquid 2-1, and then they get knocked out of the tournament by Beast Coast, losing to them 2-1. So 3 series on the main stage, and the 2 that they played against South American teams did not go well. They would end up getting knocked out a little early. For Tour 3, they would then lose 2-0 to Na'Vi, 2-1 to Virtus.pro, and then 2-1 to Team Spirit. And in the qualifiers, they faced off against Na'Vi, which was the first team that they faced that's attending this year's International, or at least is trying to attend this year's International. They're in the last chance qualifiers. And they actually lost to them. They got knocked down to the lower division after round 1 of the upper bracket, but they came back, they beat Na'Vi 2-0, and then they clean swept Virtus.pro in the grand finals, which is something that we saw in 5 out of the 6 regions, was a clean sweep in the grand finals. And it was a super impressive one. It was a very dominant sweep over one of the most dominant teams of the region. So Bet Boom, with that, they qualified to TI. Taking a look at some stats now, on Radiant they were 25-15, and on Dire they were 27-13. On First Pick they were 35-16, which is an astoundingly high win rate, whereas their last pick win rate was only 17-12, so 69% versus 57%. I should mention that this was taken over every single match that they've played throughout this entire DPC, all of these stats down here, in which there were 80 games, 52 wins, 28 losses. For Radiant First Pick, they were 20-10. On Radiant Second Pick, they were actually even at 5-5. Dire First Pick, 15-6. Dire Second Pick, 12-7. For games that were less than 40 minutes, they were 27-15, and for games that were more than 40 minutes, they were 25-13. So again, didn't seem to matter whether games were short or long. They would be pretty consistent within their results there. In game 1s, they were 23-12. In game 2s, they were 22-10. And in game 3s, they were 7-6. So just a little above 50%. And if you're curious as to why there's more game 1s than game 2s, it's because of those tiebreakers that they played in the first tour, where they played 3 best-of-1 series in a row. Following that, taking a look now at their average GPM, 23.02. We then have an average XPM for the team of 27.55, average KDA of 4.32, and an average match duration of 38 minutes and 58 seconds. Now looking at their hero stats, in which they picked a total of 79 different heroes. Their most picked by far was Mars with 28, not even a hero close to that number here. Nature's Prophet with 19, Visage with 18, Io with 13, Puck with 12, and Snapfire with 11. For their best heroes, we had Weaver, who is 7-0. Not really too much of a surprise to see that, as the hero was pretty prevalent, especially in the early portions of this DPC season. Chen, 6-0, one of the heroes that has been more popular as of late, especially in those qualifiers. Dawnbreaker, Enchantress, and Underlord, 5-0 each. Death Prophet, 5-1. Ursa, 5-1. And Visage, 14-4. Very, very high win rate there. For their worst heroes, however, there weren't too many. Razor, Lion, and Necro were all 1-3, so sure, 1-3 is not great, but it's also not that bad. That's a pretty small sample size. Same thing goes for Coddle and Doom, who were 2-4 each, and Slardar, Alk, and Nyx Assassin, 2-3. So had to be pretty nitpicky when finding some bad heroes for this team. And finally, taking a look at the heroes that they have banned the most, Timbersaw with 26, Batrider and Kunkka with 22, and Viper with 21. So, Bet Boom, coming into this year's International, I am a little bit concerned given the fact that they didn't really do too well. They didn't end off on such a strong note, although they did in the qualifiers, but in Tour 3, it was notably quiet of them. They were struggling against a lot of the other top teams in the division, which is what sunk them there. And I'm really curious to see what this is. You know, this is a team that was able to make the best of a opportunity that they had in the second tour, where they were starting off in just a small series. It wasn't a traditional tour, and they really made it pay off. And I'm curious to see if they're going to be able to repeat that or not. Again, looking at some of their stats here, their first pick win rate has been fantastic. That's going to be something to look out for if they're picking that. Unlike some other teams that maybe have a favorable side on Radiant or Dire, these guys are pretty 50-50 with it. Both of their win rates are fantastic, but the first pick win rate is great. And as you can see by the heroes that they've been picking quite a bit, Chen, Visage, Mars, these are all tempo heroes that want to run at you, want to hit timings, and not give you any space. That is something that Boom does very, very well. And it shows in their match durations. They'll beat you in the early game, or they'll beat you in the late game. So yeah. Anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments down below about BetBoom, aka the team with the worst logo in Dota. Where do you guys think they're going to place in this year's International? Do you think that they're going to be in above their heads in the group stage and maybe be one of the 4 teams heading home? Or do you think that they'll strike when the iron's hot, just like they did in Tour 2 and go on a nice dark horse dream run? We've seen it before, especially from the CIS region. I mean, our most latest TI champions were a dark horse run in and of themselves. So it'll be super exciting to see. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Check out all the links in the description, including our Discord and previous previews that I've already done. And yeah, all right, I'll talk to you guys later. My next preview will be up very shortly, and that'll be on RNG. Bye.